how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the Ansar. He praised the Ansar because يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They love those who migrated to them. They love those who came to them. They loved the immigrants, and they began to share with them their wealth and their assets in order to make them feel part of this new ummah. And this is unprecedented, perhaps, in the history of mankind, where you see a group of people migrate and others receive them and share with them everything that they have. And this is very important because the ulama say, الحب في الله أساس بنية المجتمع. Loving one another for the sake of Allah. And this is a very important point for us as we live in Australia, for example. Loving one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a foundational structure of any sound society. Loving each other for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of race, not for the sake of language, not for the sake, we said, you can love your culture, you can love your nation, there is nothing wrong with that. But when you begin to think that your culture, or your nation, or your language, or your race is better than others, this is very much the definition of nationalism, which leads to racism. As we see today in the so-called modern West, in the advanced democracies of the world, when the going got tough, we saw how they react to asylum seekers and refugees. In most cases, countries were destroyed, Syria or Iraq, because of policies made in the West, invaded some of these nations like Iraq, destroyed it completely, and the people began to migrate, could not go except to Europe, which is a very sad state actually, because Muslim countries did not host them. Of course, some did. Jordan, for example, houses and millions of refugees, be they Palestinians or Iraqi or Lebanese or Syrian. But we have seen how mostly Muslim or Middle Eastern refugees and asylum seekers have been treated by very many countries in Europe. The Muhajirin of Mecca, when they came to Medina, they were welcomed with open arms. Why? Because love for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught this concept again and again and again. Loving each other for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. He says in a hadith, for example, narrated in Muslim, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَقُولُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Allah Ta'ala will say on the day of judgment, أَيْنَ الْمُتَحَابُّونَ بِجَلَالِي أُظِلُّهُمُ الْيَوْمَ فِي ظِلِّي يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلِّي. Allah Ta'ala will say on the day of Qiyamah, where are those who loved each other for my sake? Today I shade them under the shade of my throne when there is no shade but that shade. Loving for the sake of Allah. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, من أحب لله وأبغض لله وأعطى لله وأمسك لله فقد استكمل الإيمان. من أحب لله, whosoever loves for the sake of Allah, وأبغض لله, and dislikes for the sake of Allah. Meaning you don't dislike a person because of who they are, because of their color or their race, you don't dislike. This is not allowed in Islam, to dislike a human being for being a human being, but you dislike actions that emerge or emanate from that person if those actions displease Allah. And so من أحب لله, whosoever loves for the sake of Allah, a brother or a sister who doesn't belong to your culture, they don't speak your language, they don't have the same skin color as you do, there is absolutely no relation ties between you and them, but because he or she do beautiful good deeds, because they do what pleases Allah, you love them. You love them. Man ahabba lillah. Rasulullah says, whosoever loves for the sake of Allah, wa abghadha lillah, and hates for the sake of Allah. You don't hate for your nafs, which is very difficult to do. Very difficult. This is why tarbiyah, discipline, nurturing is important. In the midst of the battlefield, Ali radiallahu anhu was fighting. and he defeats one of the mushrikeen, the pagans. This pagan now is on the ground, and Ali is about to kill him. And this person spits in Ali's face, he spits in his face. So he stops killing him. To the amazement of the person on the ground, he says, what happened? He said, my fight with you was for Allah. It's not for my nafs. When you spat in my face, I became very angry. And I was going to kill you to revenge against myself. And I stopped. I mean, what level of discipline is that? What level of discipline? Right? So you love somebody because of their goodness, the good that comes from them. Not because he belongs to my tribe or my nation or my language, and they are horrible people, they're evil, but I continue to love him against somebody else who doesn't belong to my nationality or my race. They are much better, we know they are better, but simply because he's from my race, I love him more than the other, I hate him more than the other person. This is completely unacceptable in Islam. من أحب لله وأبغض لله وأعطى لله, whosoever gives for the sake of Allah and withholds for the sake of Allah, then he or she has perfected their faith. This idea that Rasulullah was instilling, inculcating in their heart. Why? Because what is going to come soon, what the challenges that they will face are going to be insurmountable. The challenges from enemies within Medina, and then later on from the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, from the Jewish communities in Medina, from the Munafiqeen, the hypocrites in Medina, from the Mushrikeen. If they are not united on that love and in that common vision, then they will not withstand those challenges. That's why Rasulullah taught this again and again. In one Sahih Hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, for example, a man went to visit his Muslim brother in another town, another village. فَأَرْصَدَ اللَّهُ لَهُ عَلَى مِدْرَجَتِهِ مَلَكًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to this man an angel in the form of a human on the way. So the angel stopped him. He said, إِلَى أَيْنَ تَذْهَبُ? Where are you going to? He says, لِأَزُورَ أَخًا لِي فِي اللَّهِ, to visit one of my brothers for the sake of Allah. The angel said to him, is it to give him something or to take something? He said, neither. إِلَّا أَنِّي أُحِبُّهُ فِي اللَّهِ. He says, I don't want anything to give or to take. I am visiting him only because I love him for the sake of Allah. Then Allah Ta'ala tells the angel to tell this man, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّكَ كَمَا أَحْبَبْتَهُ. Tell him Allah loves you just as you love your brother for the sake of Allah. Allahu Akbar. Look, a simple visit to a Muslim brother or a sister to a sister. No, nothing, just because I love you for Allah. Look at the reward. من أحب بالله وأبغض لله. So this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was teaching him. قال الله تبارك وتعالى حقت محبتي للمتحابين فيها. Allah تبارك وتعالى says in the hadith Qudsi, my love, Allah says, my love becomes wajib, my love becomes necessary for those who love each other for my sake. And if you love somebody for Allah's sake, this is part of iman. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you cannot have complete faith. You won't have complete faith until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Imam Nawawi says, brotherhood here doesn't only mean brotherhood in faith, but brotherhood in humanity also. Meaning, as a Muslim, you will not have complete faith until you love for others what you love for yourself. You love for the Jannah, you should love for your Jannah, paradise. And so, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he instilled that love in them. Now remember, the Arabs Remember that. So you have to put all this in context. Remember when we were reading, when we were listening to the Seera right at the beginning, that if the camel of one tribe drank from the water of the other tribe, they would fight for 40 years. I mean, this is what you have to remember. Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj were always fighting. And now Rasulullah says, you can't move forward until you love each other for the sake of Allah. So much so that they started doing sacrifice for others, for to give others. For example, when the ayah of the Quran was revealed, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not attain birr until you spend of what you love. Birr here, the ulama say, can mean one of two things. Birr meaning taqwa, righteousness. Meaning you will not attain birr, righteousness, taqwa, piety, until you spend all the things that you love. You spend meaning you give for the sake of Allah. But also birr can mean Jannah. So you cannot attain Jannah until you spend on what you love. So when this ayah was revealed, for example, Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu narrates, when this ayah was revealed, Abu Talha al-Ansari, one of the companions of Medina, whose name was Abu Talha, the minute he heard this ayah, look how they went and straight away applied it. He ran to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, Ya Rasulullah, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, Allah says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ, you will not attain righteousness or Jannah, paradise, until you spend all the things you love. وَإِنَّ أَحَبَّ شَيْءٍ إِلَيْهِ حَدِيقَ بَيْرُحَا. And the most beloved thing to me is my garden, بَيْرُحَا. When you talk about garden, this is a big garden with hundreds of palm trees, and it had a little water stream running through it. If anyone has been to Mecca or Medina, you know, if you've gone for Hajj, and in Medina especially, you go for the tour to go to see Uhud, and you go and see, pray to Rak'at in Quba, and so on. And then they take you to the date factory. The bus drivers, they usually take you to the date to buy some dates, because one, so you can get dates, but also they get a bit of a commission. But if you're new, you just go along and they take you to just a factory, literally a factory. But if you know, you will say, no, don't take me to the factory, take me to the farm. Take me to the date farm. And when they take you to the date farm, beautiful. It's a garden. Gardens, if you've ever been to a garden of palm trees, it's the most beautiful thing. Because as you go under its shade, even in the hottest day, you feel so cool. Right? Beautiful. So imagine Abu Talha radiallahu anhu, who had, it says he had أكثر أهل المدينة نخلا. He had most of the palm trees than anybody else in Medina. Meaning he was wealthy. And his garden by Ruha was actually a very large garden with hundreds of palm trees, and it says it had a nice little stream of water. And so typically they would go and sit there in the afternoon. You know, if it was, today's time, you take your espresso, cappuccino, mint tea, and you go and sit there. They didn't have that. They had the camel's milk and dates and God knows what. When this ayah was revealed, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, you will not attain paradise, nor attain righteousness until you spend all the things you love. So he went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He went to the Messenger of Allah and he said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, the most beloved property of mine is this garden, and Allah says in the Quran, I will not attain paradise until I spend on what I love. I give it all in charity for the sake of Allah." Just like that. Just like that. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to him, and he said, وَإِنَّهَا صَدَقَ لِلَّهِ أَرْجُو بِرَّهَا. He said, it's a charity for the sake of Allah. فَضَعْهَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ حَيْثُ أَرَاكَ اللَّهِ. So I give it to you and you do with it whatever you please, O Messenger of Allah. Meaning distribute it and give it to whosoever you want. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم ذلك مال رابح ذلك مال رابح وقد سمعت ما قلت وإني أرى أن تجعلها في الأقربين. فقال أبو طلحة أفعل يا رسول الله. فقسمها أبو طلحة في أقاربه وبني عمه. He said, O Messenger of Allah, it's all charity for the sake of Allah. Rasulullah said, it's a profitable trade, O Talha, a profitable trade with Allah. But then he said to him, he said, but I think if you are going to give it away, it's best to give it to those who are near to you. They say charity begins at home. Why? Because, my brothers and sisters, Islam is a practical, pragmatic deen. There is no point in giving sadaqah to a stranger when those closest to you are in need. And if you give sadaqah to those who are close to you, then not only will you be rewarded for giving sadaqah, but also for connecting salat al-rahim, kinship ties. Right? He said, I should give it to the aqrabin. If you want to give it to those who are near to you. He did, and he said he distributed the land between his relations and his cousins. This is the sign of that love and the willing to sacrifice. And this is a very important point because we cannot progress as a society and move forward unless we are willing to sacrifice. Somebody can sacrifice some of his wealth. Somebody might sacrifice some of their time. Somebody might sacrifice some of their experience, but all sacrifices are necessary. Abdurrahman bin Auf, who, as you know, later becomes one of the wealthiest Sahaba. Abdurrahman bin Auf, he becomes so wealthy that he says, any stone I turn, I find money under it, essentially. And he was so successful as a tradesman, but when he migrated to Medina, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he made a brotherhood between him and Sa'd bin Rabi'. That's what Rasul did, coupled people together. You be the brother of this, and you be the brother of this, and you be the sister of that, and look after each other. In doing so, it's a very smart strategy. Why? You distribute the load, and this way everybody ends up looking after everybody. What happens generally in our community is that the load is on one or two or three people. And after a while it's not sustainable, or they buckle. The load, when it's distributed, there is more sustainability and it is more effective. So Abdurrahman bin Auf said to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he made brotherhood between me and Sa'd bin Rabi'. فقال سعد بن الربيع إني أكثر الأنصار مالا. Sa'd bin Rabi' said, I am the wealthiest of the people of Medina. Talha said, I have the most of the palm trees. Sa'd, he had liquid assets. He had money. He said, I have most of the money. He's saying to Abdul Rahman, listen to this. He says, I am the wealthiest in Medina, and I am giving you half of my wealth. Allahu Akbar. Who does that? This is the tarbiyah. This is the nurturing of deen. And they say when the iman penetrates the heart, everything becomes possible. All sacrifices become possible. Right? But when it enters, قالت الأعراب آمنا. The A'rab, the Bedouins, they came with this big claim. Allah tells us in the Quran, قالت الأعراب آمنا. The Bedouins came and they said, we have iman, we believe. Because the claim of iman is big. Claim that you have iman. Allah responds directly, لا تقول آمنا. Don't say you have faith. But say, أسلمنا, we have Islam. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانِ. And when iman iman penetrates your heart, then say you have iman. There's a difference, the ulama say there's a difference between making a claim and being truthful to that claim. Right? وَلَمَّا يَكُنْ الْإِيمَانُ when iman penetrates your heart. When Rasulullah opened Mecca, in Fath of Mecca, as you know, one of his worst enemies, and we will see this later, one of his worst enemies was a woman. Who knows the name of that woman? We all know. Which one? Hind. Hind was such a staunch enemy of Rasulullah and Islam. She had so much hate in her heart towards Rasulullah and Islam that, as you know, she ordered the assassination of Hamza. You know that. And she said to the Wahshi, "Is go and open Hamza. When you assassinate the uncle of Rasul Hamza, open him up and take his liver out, and I want to bite it." Can you imagine? But then she did something even much worse. She tried to do something much worse, which most people are not aware of. And that prior to this, when she was coming with an army towards Medina, they say she passed by the grave of the mother of Rasulullah, and she asked the men to dig her out. That's how much hatred she had for Rasulullah. But of course they didn't listen to her. They said, "You're crazy." This lady who had so much hate, as you know, when the Prophet of Allah Rasulullah went back to Mecca victorious and opened Mecca, and now people were seeing Muslims living Islam, of the people who converted to Islam was Hind. She submitted. She became a Muslim. She said, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad." That's how they become Muslim. By testifying there is no ilah, no God but Allah, and testifying Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Anyone who says, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah," I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger, becomes a Muslim. She became a Muslim. The news spread in Medina that Hind دخلت الإسلام. Hind entered Islam. I'm talking about the penetration of iman and Islam into the heart. The news was أن هند دخلت الإسلام. Hind literally means entered into Islam, the fold of Islam. It is said she corrected that woman. قالت بل دخل الإسلام في هند. She said, no, I didn't enter into Islam. Islam entered into Hind. There is a difference between somebody being in Islam and Islam being that somebody. There's a difference. Right? And this is what those Sahaba, these are the companions. So Sa'd ibn Rabi' says to Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Abdul Rahman is just migrated. He says, I am the wealthiest person in Medina and I'm giving you half of my wealth. Imagine if we as a country, Australia, which is very rich in resources, big land, everybody's doing well. Imagine if migrants were to come, refugees, and we say this, not give them half. Just say, you know what, I have a spare room, you can come and stay with me. Instead, with the 7,000 Syrians, we're trying to bring 7,000 Syrian refugees here, there was a big fuss about it. And can we take 7,000? When Jordan, which is the size of a corner of Australia, took, hundreds of thousands, if not a couple of million, we as a big country were scared to take 7,000. Because it's the mindset. So Abdul Rahman says, لا حاجة لي في ذلك. Abdul Rahman says, you know what, brother, I don't need half of your wealth. I have a little bit of money, I'll go and do some business and trade, and I'll make you. And that's how he started, and he became one of the wealthiest. And you could see that this is a very important theme. The theme of bringing people together in Medina, putting their differences aside, creating love and affection between them, and creating in them the willingness to sacrifice for the sake of other brothers and sisters. You know what that means? It killed selfishness. It killed selfishness. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ. Allah Ta'ala speaks about that in the Quran. Shuh is when you have that such selfishness that you are unwilling and unable to give anything because it's all about you. And from shuh, from this disease of selfishness comes greed, tamā. But if you can cure that selfishness, and Islam does that, then you'll be able to give. You'll be able to give. Why? Because you know Allah is Al-Razzaq. You know Allah is the one who sustains. Because giving is directly related to believing in Allah, that Allah is the one who sustains. So when the Prophet ﷺ one day walks into the room of Bilal, the Abyssinian Bilal, who was a slave and now emancipated because of Islam, and Bilal was one of the poorest. And the situation was much worse because they had a drought, jafaf. They didn't have a good produce that year. The next year they had a good produce of dates. So Bilal saved some of those dates, put it in the corner of his room. There's a pile of dates. Rasulullah ﷺ walks in. He sees Bilal having a pile of dates. He says to Bilal, "What is this, O Bilal? What is all of this?" Dates. He says, "I'm saving it for bad days." The Rasulullah ﷺ says, look how he's teaching them. قال أنفق ينفق الله عليك. O Bilal, spend and Allah will spend on you. O Bilal, spend and Allah will spend on you. In today's capitalist mindset, the more you hoard, the better it is for you. The more you keep. Rasulullah says, مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِنْ صَدَقَةٍ. Wealth is never diminished by giving sadaqah. It may physically diminish, but in terms of barakah, in terms of divine blessing, it increases. But also Rasulullah taught them to be sincere towards one another and be able to give advice to each other openly, but with love. This is all important for any Muslim community. So the famous story of Salman al-Farisi. Salman al-Farisi said, Rasulullah ﷺ made brotherhood between me and Abu Darda. Salman the Persian. Salman the Persian who converted to Islam. He was first a Zoroastrian and then he became a Christian. And he continued to search for the truth until he finally became a Muslim. He says, when I migrated to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ he made brotherhood between me and Abu Darda. Abu Darda was married to Darda. And one thing about Abu Darda is that he was a zahid. What sort of zuhud? The Sahaba, zuhud means he was, detached from dunya. He was practicing austerity. He didn't want to have too much. None of them had too much anyway. But can you imagine if, when it says Abu Darda was a person who was more detached? He just wanted to worship Allah, to do qiyam, to fast on Allah, to read his Quran. He wanted to do the least with dunya. And so Salman al-Farisi, may Allah be pleased with him, he says, the Prophet ﷺ, he made brotherhood in Medina between me and Abu Darda. And because this brotherhood, they would visit each other, they would talk, they would advise each other. And this is important. Everybody needs a friend who they can confide in. And my advice to the young people, young brothers and sisters, I know, of course, your brother, your father, and your mother are the best advisors, but also you almost need some other good person who maybe is a role model, a Muslim or a Muslimah, who you sometimes need to go and seek advice from. And it's important to do that, to feel, I really love this person, or I really like this person, and I trust them. And you know, sometimes you can't always talk to your mom and dad about everything, so you can go and seek advice from a person who knows Allah, not just anyone. Not just anyone. So Abu Darda says one day, he said, I went to visit, Salman says, I went to visit Abu Darda, and we mentioned this sometime, but we'll repeat it. قال فزار سلمان أبا الدرداء فرأى أم الدرداء متبذلة يعني مش معتنية في نفسها. Salman went to visit Abu Darda, and when he walked in, he found that the wife of Abu Darda, متبذلة, meaning she looked haggard, you know. And they say this was before the hijab, the verses of the hijab. فقال ما شأنك? He said to her, Salman was with, he said, what's the matter with you? Why you look like this? قالت أخوك أبو الدرداء ليس له حاجة في الدنيا. He says, his fault, my husband, he has no need of this dunya. He's completely detached, that he doesn't even think I'm home, right? Almost. فجاء أبو الدرداء فصنع له طعاما فقال له كل قال فإني صائم. So Abu Darda brought food for the guest, Salman, and presented the food. When Salman wanted to eat, he said to Abu Darda, eat with me. Abu Darda said, no, I'm fasting. فقال Salman said to the guest, to the host, I will not eat until you eat. Meaning Abu Darda was fasting, nafil fast. It's an optional fast, and when it's optional, most of the ulama say, if it's an optional fast, you can break it anytime, and you don't have to repeat it. Salman said, I'm not eating until you eat. So he ate. The host ate with the guest, which should be the way. I recently traveled, when I traveled to Canberra, you know, after a long travel, and I was staying with a friend, an old friend, in his unit. And you know, when you see a friend, you haven't seen him for years, you go there, naturally he's going to put some food for you, and you anticipate eating together. And so when I started to eat, he didn't eat. It wasn't Ramadan, so I knew it was never fast. And I said to him exactly the same thing. I said, why aren't you eating? He said, I'm fasting. I said, but you knew I'm coming. So let's see on midday. It's not going to look good that I'm going to eat. I'm going to be eating when you're fasting. I said, is it a natural fast? Is it an optional fast? He said, yes. So I kept quiet. So he said, why? Teach you. What's the matter? I said, well, this is the matter. The matter is that when a guest comes to you, it's an optional fast. It's not good you present food to your guest and you say, I'm fasting. Right? Unless it's Ramadan, of course, you're not going to present guest food for anybody. So Abu Darda said, eat. So Salman said, eat. Abu Darda ate. When they came to sleep, which tells us that also Salman slept in the house of Abu Darda, because his brother. When it came to time to sleep, Salman, the guest, tried to sleep, but he saw Abu Darda standing up, awake. He said, why are you awake? He said, no, I'm going to pray the whole night. He said, no, sleep. Salman is saying to the guest, sleep. I mean, this is the level of brotherhood. They are actually, one is an Arab, one is a Persian. But the level of brotherhood was such that he was able to give this sincere advice, knowing he's not going to offend his friend. And the friend knew that the advice that he's given is a very sincere advice. I'm not going to get offended. The Arabs, they say, nasiha jamal. You know, they say, right? Nasiha jamal. They say one advice equals one camel. Nowadays, people don't want to be advised, don't want to seek advice. When the advice used to cost a camel, so to speak. So then Salman said, no, you sleep. So they slept. And at the last third of the night, and a couple of hours, few hours before Fajr, Salman woke up and he said to Abu Darda, now wake up and pray. So the next morning, Salman said to his friend, Inna li rabbika alayka haqqa. ولنفسك عليك حقا ولأهلك عليك حقا فأعط كل ذي حق حقه. فأتى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فذكر ذلك له فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم صدق سلمان. So now Salman, the Persian, the guest, is saying to the host after all of this, he said, my brother, Allah has a right upon you, and yourself, you have a right upon yourself, and your wife has a right upon you. So give each their right. This is balance. One of the hardest things humans can do is maintain balance. But if a person can learn how to maintain balance in his dunya and deen, they will achieve so much. Balance is the hardest thing. The easiest, you know what's the easiest? Is to go to either extreme. Either this end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum. Extreme, to go to either extreme is easy. To be balanced is one of the most difficult things. Give Allah His right. Give yourself its right. Give your family their right. Today they call it, you know what they call it? What's the trendy, professional, academic term for that? Yes. Work-life balance. That's what they call it. Work-life, and now we say work-life balance. They have books on this, they have journal articles on this, work-life balance. Work-life balance. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. But it is one of the most important pieces of advice that all of us need. Balance. If you don't balance, you will not last. Something has to give in. If you don't balance, something has to give in. Either you will compromise deen because there is no balance, or you will compromise other responsibilities of life. You can't if you go to either extreme. But if you learn how to balance, and one of the best ways to learn how to balance is to wait for it. Time management. Time management. Easy, but difficult. So, my brothers and sisters, you see how Rasulullah was deeply inculcating this relationship. Can you see how important it is? Can you see? Can you see how without such relationships, we as a community here, for example, not in Australia, here at Al-Khalil Masjid, here in Adelaide, if we as a community don't get to that stage of I love you for the sake of Allah, not because of nationality, and you can feel, you can come to me at any time if you have a need, and I feel I am able to sacrifice for the sake of Allah to help you. Unless we become like this, it will be very hard to achieve what we were talking about some time ago, that vision and that strategy, and where we want to be 20 years from now. To end with this story, and the young brothers, especially the sisters, should listen to this very carefully. Young meaning up to 40. After 40 you start, some people find wisdom at 40. I'm still waiting. When I get to 40, it's like, what's that is going to happen now? And some people start declining after 40. I won't mention names. Declining in health, they start complaining back pain, and they have this pain, and they have that pain. So there was this old man, father of older age, and his son was about 16, 17. And the son, you can replace son or daughter. All they talk about, my friend, my friend, my friend, the son, my friend, and the father is always here, my friend, my friend. So the father one day wanted to test his friend, his son's friendship. So One night at 2 a.m., he went and woke up his son. He said, get up, we have to go and see your friend. I think he's in need. Oh, can you imagine a 16-year-old at 2 a.m. trying to wake him up? You know, Dad, do we have to do it now? You know. He said, no, we don't have to do it now. And he left it. After a couple of nights, he went again and he woke his son and he said to him, you have to come with me now. It's urgent. But where? He said, you just need to come with me now. So they went, and this old father, the old man, went to one of his friends without the friend knowing the father is coming to him at 3 a.m. And the father knocked on the door. And the son said, Dad, it's too early. You know, what are they going to say? Why are we here? You know how it is. He said, just wait, son. Just wait. Of course, there was delay from inside. And the son was saying to the father, he's not going to open the door. It's too early in the morning or it's too late. He said, just wait. And after about 10-15 minutes, the light came on. And the door opened. And the friend was standing there fully dressed. In this hand, he had a parcel of money. In this hand, he had some food, a basket of food, and he had a walking stick next to him. Now the boy is watching. So the father said to the friend, Assalamu alaikum. He said, Wa alaikum assalam. Now the friend didn't ask, what brings you at this hour? Why are you here? He just waited. So the father said to him, why are you all dressed up and you've got, we just only knocked on the door at 3 a.m. and you're all dressed up and you have money in this hand and you have some food in this basket and you're carrying a walking stick. He said, yes, because when you knocked and you called, I knew it was you. And I said to myself, my friend will not come to me at 3 a.m. unless one, he's in need of money, and I've got whatever money I have to give him. Or maybe you're in need of food, and I have some food for you. Or you're in trouble, I've got my walking stick to come and help you. To meet whoever's living you out. So the father looked at his son, and he said, son, this is friendship. This is friendship. There are people like that. That is real friendship. A friend is one who is there for you when they need them, but more importantly is the one who really cares for your best interest in this world and the next world. So my young brothers and sisters who are listening, some of the so-called friends today who are friends of leisure and enjoyment, wallahi, I swear by Allah, on the day of judgment, they will run away from you as far as they can see, as far as they can run, and they will say, I don't know you and you're not my friend. In fact, the opposite. They will grab you by the throat, or you will grab them by the throat, and you say, it is because of you I was misled. So be careful who your friend is and learn from the Sahaba. Look at that type of friendship. May Allah Ta'ala give us this level of friendship. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.